I think we all understand the benefits of following a recipe. Even if you're a creative cook and like to improvise, often you begin with a base of ingredients that create a foundation for a good meal. No matter a master chef or a beginner, there's no better way to ensure consistency than a great recipe. Now, in the world of business, a common term for a recipe is SOPs, or standard operating procedures. Research shows that SOPs can improve efficiency, quality, employee training, and compliance. Organizations with well-documented SOPs can experience 15 to 25% efficiency improvements due to reduced errors and streamlined processes. Now, in order to see these improvements, companies need to ensure proper implementation, clear communication, and regular review and updates. So I asked Hala Nassereddine, PhD and President, CEO of NCM Consulting, LLC, to join me for a discussion on her work with the Electri Foundation and what she uncovered for helpful guidelines for contractors wanting to begin using SOPs in their companies and on their projects. Now, in addition to consulting, Hala is also an associate professor in construction engineering and project management, a program within the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Nassereddine was chosen for the Russell J. Alisi Electri International 2020 Early Career Award for her proposed project on allocating and leveraging BIM efforts for electrical contractors. Well, welcome to Keeping the Lights On. I'm your host, Todd Reed, and on this podcast, I connect with the owners and pros who design, build, and maintain our electrical, communications, and industrial world to explore the best ways forward. Hey, before we get to the interview, I would like to ask, or maybe beg, for your help to grow this show by subscribing and leaving a 5-star rating in your favorite podcast player and on YouTube. All right, my begging is complete. Let's get into the show.
Well, Hala, one of the things, I like to do on the show is one way you get to know each other and stuff is kind of relax over a meal, break bread together. And so I always like to ask my guests this kind of the same question, kind of get us rolling here. If I or one of our listeners were to visit you in your hometown, where might you take us out to eat?
So I am based in Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
And there are many nice places in Lexington, but I'm not someone who eats out very often.
Sure.
So I would actually invite you over for a authentic Lebanese meal at my house.
Awesome. Okay. What would the meal consist of? Or what would our courses be?
Okay. You're in for a ride.
Okay.
So we'd start with appetizers.
Okay.
I would make a fresh tabbouleh salad.
Okay.
I'll use ingredients straight from my backyard.
Oh, man, awesome.
Gonna be super fresh. Now, tabbouleh is my favorite, but it does have that tangy flavor that it's not everyone's favorite.
Okay.
So I'd also make fattoush salad. That's typically a crowd pleaser.
Okay.
And then we'd have some homemade hummus.
Love hummus.
Stuffed, great pleats. So those are gonna be our appetizers.
Gosh, okay.
And then for the main course, I'm gonna go a little bit untraditional. I'd introduce you to my favorite dish. It's called mulukhiyeh.
Okay.
I'll butcher the name and say mulukhiyeh.
Okay.
But it's a hearty, unique stew. It has a very unique flavor. It's very comforting. It's made of jute leaves, onion, chicken, rice, and spices.
Okay.
The only problem with this dish is it's so light that even after many servings, you'd still have room for more.
Okay. Wow.
So in addition to that, I'd also prepare my specialty chicken shawarma.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfectly seasoned.
I've never had that. I hear about that's a food item I hear about, but I just never have done it.
Must have it.
Okay.
And you should have it as a sandwich, not as a plate.
Okay.
Sandwich is the best way to have it.
What kind of bread would you use?
The regular pita bread.
Pita bread. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
And then you want to toast it. That's the best way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then once we're done with the main course, I'd give you a 10-minute break, and then I'll hit you with some fruit, coffee, and homemade sweet.
Okay. What is coffee made a little differently in Lebanon?
Yeah, it's like more Turkish coffee.
Oh, Turkish.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're done. We're going to go into Lexington and go get dinner.
You're welcome.
At
Anytime.
At Hala's house. Okay. All right. Well, you sounds like you know these food items pretty well. And you probably do this too. You're always just probably trying out new things, and you follow a recipe, right? I have to follow a recipe because there's very few things I make regularly enough to know. And I think this ties us in. I always try to find some tie-in with that. And I think it ties in perfectly with what we're going to talk about today, and that's SOPs, or standard operating procedures, which is kind of a recipe, right, to get things done, sort of. So we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about standard operating procedures. So what prompted you to do this work around this SOPs?
Sure. So no company wants to be drowning in inefficiency. Every business wants to crack the code for efficiency. And one company that has done that well is Toyota. They are famous for their culture of excellence, and that culture is built on the foundation of standardization.
Okay.
And Toyota knows that a good process is going to lead good results. And if you have a good process in place, you want it to be repeatable. You want it to be implementable across all of your operations. But if you don't have standard operating procedures in place, trying to achieve that consistency is like trying to recreate a masterpiece by only copying the brush strokes.
Okay.
Everyone is guessing, and the final product is so unpredictable.
Right.
Now, when we talk about electrical contractors, processes are everywhere for them, and that's probably the commonality across all businesses and all projects. They all do procurement, they all do change orders, they all do estimation, and so on. But when we talk to electrical contractors about standard operating procedures, the common themes that we heard were no two projects are the same, so SOPs don't apply for us. Or they said, standard operating procedures, yeah, those are really difficult for us to create. Where do we even start? And some even said, well, SOPs, yeah, we do have a way of doing things, like Todd or Electric. Todd does it this way, Hala does it this other way. That's not standardization.
Okay.
So because of that, knowing how SOPs are important, Electri kind of wanted to take action. And they decided to sponsor this research on standard operating procedure to bridge the gap, because we saw that standard operating procedures are rare among electrical contractors.
Okay.
So we wanted to do this research basically to say that SOPs are not a burden. SOPs provide you with the opportunity. They allow you to speak the same language, and then they allow you to set up the project as well as the company for success.
Okay.
So the reason why we wanted to do this work is we wanted to put some more insights into SOPs, and also we wanted to provide some practical resources for the electrical contractors.
The thing we hear about in any trade is that people are retiring. We're losing people faster than we can replace them, and it's not young people we're losing necessarily. It's experienced, very knowledgeable people who are retiring or whatever. So how's that loss of experienced project managers and superintendents affecting the transfer of tacit knowledge within the company?
That's a great question, and I'm pretty sure every company in every sector is struggling with this. So studies show that tacit knowledge, and here we talk about that personal knowledge that resides in the mind of the person. This tacit knowledge, according to the studies, is a core source of value creation for a company. And that's what makes the experienced project managers and field leaders central to operations. They are the ones with that deep and often, as you said, unspoken knowledge on how to do things, truly how to do things, not just how to do things. And their experience is extremely valuable because that experience is built over years of trial, error, and experimentation.
Yeah.
All to understand what works best. And when this tacit knowledge is not documented or captured, it can be lost forever, and then the company can get really hurt.
Yeah.
And this is where standard operating procedures come into the equation. SOPs can truly provide that mechanism to capture this tacit knowledge so that it's not lost, it's preserved, it's passed on, and the contractor can capitalize on this experience for years to come.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of those deep things don't change much, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. As you're talking, Hala, I just thought about SOPs. Like, it seems like an SOP could be a competitive differentiator.
Absolutely.
For a contractor.
Absolutely. It's your secret recipe.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, interesting. That's another way to look at it as a benefit. And, maybe it's a little bit of work and a burden to get going, but it could help you in the long run. What's the biggest impact due to a lack of SOPs that you saw?
That's a good one. The biggest impact. So when a company doesn't have an SOP in place, they lose that crucial element of standardization. And when that happens, inconsistency takes over. And inconsistency breeds inefficiency. And that inefficiency can just ripples through everything, your people, your process, your performance, your culture. And kind of going back to my first point, every business wants to crack the code for efficiency.
Yeah.
And then if I take that even a step further, if we don't have standard operating procedures, how can we hold our people accountable? If you don't give them a clear, well-documented process on how to do things, how do you expect them to get it right without telling them?
Yeah.
And we talk about accountability. Every time we talk to project managers or superintendents, they would say everyone hates the A word in construction. No one wants to be accountable. And they kind of have a point. If you're not providing them with the standard, it's not fair to hold them accountable.
Right. Yeah, what are you holding them accountable to?
Exactly. Where's the standard? And then I take this also a step further and say, if you don't have a standard operating procedure in place, it's going to be really tough for you to improve systematically.
Right.
I personally see SOPs as a way to surface problems and abnormalities in your processes. Put it on paper, and then walk through the process and see how you can improve. But if it's not on paper, you're basing your actions on judgment, not on facts. Just put it on paper, and then you'll be able to improve. But if you don't have SOPs, it could truly be difficult to talk about true improvement in a systematic manner.
Yeah. So I talked with Amanda King from Wired Leadership. I don't know if you know who that is, but she was talking about 10 steps to improve the communications gap.
Okay.
Two of them, one of them was SOPs. And then, of course, kind of project debriefs. And both of which, well, SOPs, obviously you need that, but to do a debrief, you need a SOP, I think, to compare it against and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Reflections are extremely important. We don't do them very often.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because again, if you don't, what are you going to compare it to? Like,
Yes.
I mean, you didn't meet the budget or dollar or time-wise, and that's it. I mean, what else?
Yeah.
So.
And how do you capture it, and how do you analyze it, how do you
Yeah.
learn from it?
Yeah, data was a big thing we talked about too.
Yes.
Like you have to have the data to do it, to keep people accountable. Kind of brought up sports and how much, stats and all that.
Yes.
They use that.
And even in sports, they all have a game plan.
Yeah.
They have SOPs on how you want to train them, SOPs on everything.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like a great idea. So what are some of the main challenges faced by contractors in standardizing the work across, different projects?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful when we talk about challenges. It might be helpful to break them down into two categories based on the conversations that we had with the contractors.
Okay.
Challenges to get started
Okay.
and challenges to maintain SOPs.
Okay.
So for the first category, challenges to get started, I think for many contractors, SOPs can be overwhelming and daunting.
Okay.
And we had a recent survey where we asked electrical contractors, where in your business do you think SOPs are needed, and what SOPs are needed? And many said, everywhere and everything.
Great.
I love that response because it tells you how much SOPs are needed, but at the same time, it shows you that there is a problem. If you want to tackle everything everywhere, it's really difficult for you to be organized, for you to be systematic.
It's overwhelming too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just like taking that first step and getting started, that's always a challenge. Where do we even start? Just look at your biggest pain points and start there. So that's the first challenge in getting started. A second challenge that probably applies to both categories, I would say, changing people's habits. When you're going to provide them with a standard operating procedure, you're asking them to change the way that they usually do work, and that's never easy. So changing habits is also a challenge. A third challenge to getting started, I would say, is getting the right people to lead this effort.
Okay.
For every contractor, whether they are small, medium, or large, you always have people who are the early innovators, the early adopters, those champions. Finding those people and asking them to lead those efforts is going to be insanely critical for the success.
Okay.
Now, once you have SOPs in place, you want to maintain them.
Right.
And just maintaining them poses its own set of challenges. The biggest one we see is accountability. Kind of going back to the previous question. A lot of contractors ask us, how can we build that culture of accountability? How can we make people use the SOPs? So another challenge is, how do you ask them to use it consistently on their projects, but also how do you make them update the SOPs as well, because the last thing you want to do is have a yellowed SOP. You create it and then no one is using it.
Right.
It's in someone's drawer. So accountability and getting people to use it and update it is also another challenge that we heard from the contractors.
So one of the things we talked about earlier was getting data. And so if you don't have SOPs, you're not going to have standardized data, right? So I'm kind of curious how this is impacting the efficiency and decision-making in construction projects. Did you run across that?
Yes, data is everywhere.
Yeah.
Especially in construction and on construction projects. We had a general session this morning, and one of the panelists made a great comment. He said, data is useless if you don't turn it into information and then into insights. Mm-hmm. And with the rapid technology advancements that we have, with AI dominating the headlines, the quality of data cannot be overstated. And when I think about AI, I like acronyms. So when I think about AI, I think about it in the sense of a framework, a CIA framework.
Okay.
Context, input, analytics.
Okay.
So you have to understand the context, understand the decision to be made, understand the situation. And then comes input. What data do I need to collect? And finally, you have the analytics. What model or method or technique am I going to use to analyze this data to inform my decision? And then when we talk about data, so this approach is great, but the catch is that it's only as good as the data that fuels it. And the question is, how can we get quality data consistently?
Okay.
So for contractors, it's really critical for them to have standardization, understand data is expensive. Understand what data is needed, how the data is going to be collected, and how the data is going to be used, what information or what decisions this data is going to inform. So data standardization is a big problem, and we're trying to tackle it through different efforts, but we have to yet move the needle toward improvement.
Yeah, okay. Can you maybe elaborate on some of the solutions that your research has uncovered to address the challenges of standardization?
Sure. So as part of this Electri SOP project, I was the researcher, and then I had a task force that I was working with. And when we first started the project, we wanted to provide some SOP examples for the electrical contractors. And based on the feedback from the task force members, we decided we're going to create SOPs for daily reports, procurement, look-ahead schedules, change and additional tickets. So those were the 4 SOPs that we wanted to generate as part of this research. And then as we engaged with contractors, we learned that there is a need for an SOP for document management.
Okay.
So we added that activity as part of the deliverable. So for those SOPs, we provided examples, we provided checklists, we provided flowcharts to kind of walk the contractor through SOPs for each of those activities. As we were doing this work, we realized that there are countless of processes that contractors would need to create SOPs for.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we're only providing examples for 5 activities?
Yeah.
So we had a discussion about, can we provide contractors with something so that they don't think that SOPs is this overwhelming exercise? And that's when we created the SOP for SOPs.
That's funny. Okay.
So we had 4 phases. You start with the initiation phase. That's kind of more change management, making sure that you've got all the right elements together. Then we walk into the planning phase, and then development and implementation.
Okay.
So we created that document. And as the project progressed, we had another discussion. Josh Bone, actually, he had discussions with electrical contractors, and they were talking about the need to provide better resources to train the workforce. And this is where we thought about, you know what, construction activities happen on every single project. Let's just have a template for what information, for what data, what resources need to be included in a construction activity SOP.
Okay.
So we ended up providing a template for construction activities. And as we were wrapping up this project, this was such an iterative process.
Yeah, right. Sounds like it.
Yes, yeah. We've been working on it for about a year.
Okay.
Yes, and then toward the end, the task force had a discussion, and they said, you know what, we're providing all those resources, but it's still not easy, it's not very accessible for the electrical contractors if they just want to go now and build their own SOP. Can we create something? Can we create a tool so that they don't have to worry about the format, they don't have to worry about the colors, none of that. So we ended up creating SoPro, again, another acronym, SOP production tool.
Okay.
The SoPro tool, it's all automated. You can select a category for which you want to build an SOP, and then we just walk you through the different steps to consistently build your SOP and centralize everything in one database.
Okay.
So all of these together, there's something for every contractor, whether they already have SOPs in place or they are about to get started on their SOP journey. We wanted this project to speak to all contractors by providing either samples, examples, SOPs for SOPs, or even a tool to build the SOPs.
What have you found about, so I one of those career things that I talked about, changing into is becoming a professional pilot. So I got my private license, and checklists are huge in that area, right? Back when I was doing it a few years ago, it was all on some sort of paper and like a nice ring binder that you could easily open and you check. I mean, everything's a checklist because you want to make sure you don't forget any steps. Now it's done digitally on the thing, but there was a place to look. I always would use that notebook. Now they just use their electronic things. So I think, to me, when I think about SOPs, I think the struggle might be using them. Even like where do they exist? In pilot training, it's like it's drilled into you. Like you will do it. In fact, I've kind of used that to do some things in my life, like just always have it handy. So I guess what I'm getting at is how do you get them to consistently start using it? And yeah,
accessibility is a big issue, and getting people to use them is another big issue. It truly comes down to the culture. I believe SOPs should generate themselves. They should basically develop themselves on their own. If they come from a need, then the people are going to realize that this is meant to make my life easier, not to jeopardize the work that I do. So it really has to come from a culture, from a mindset shift. It also has to address a need. You also need to have consensus. You need to involve the right people in the discussion. If I'm building an SOP but it's coming top down, it's not going to work.
Okay.
And it could be as simple as going to the people, hey, you've been doing this on a daily basis. Can you just put it on a piece of paper? And then we'll figure out how to make it look pretty and disseminate that to other people.
Okay.
But just like taking that first step is always the challenge.
So have the people that are doing the work help create it, first of all.
Yes, SOPs should come from the people doing the work. It shouldn't come from someone on the outside. It shouldn't be from an outsider.
Did you always try to look at a way to make it an electronic thing? So if I'm working on a job, I know like where to find it, where to get it, and it's electronically filled out, or is it paper? Obviously, I think everything wants to go electronic, but I'm curious what you saw.
It depends on the activity, but for example, for procurement, we do have a Word document that outlines the procurement process. So it's a Word document, and as a company, you can take it, you can refine it, make it fit your operation, and then you can have it on a shared server with your people. Now, for the tool itself, for creating the SOPs, we ended up using Excel tool, and the reason why we did Excel is because we realized that most of the NICA contractors are smaller to medium-sized contractors.
Okay.
So we wanted to provide them a software that they already have in place.
Sure, yeah, makes
but
sense.
we're really hoping that someone could take this research and just do it online.
Okay.
To me, having an online platform is going to be the next step for this work.
Yeah, and somehow making it just a standard when you do a project. Here it is. Here's how you access it.
Exactly, just on your phone, pull it. Because when you do Excel and you use programming in Excel, you can't really pull it on your phone.
Well, this is really good stuff. So how can contractors learn more about the SOP project?
I love that question. Go to electri.org.
Okay.
Create an account if you don't have one, and then click on the research tab, research report, and download the free report.
Okay.
It's a free resource. And the document that we put together is an interactive document. So we didn't want to overwhelm the reader with all the information and the products that we produced. So if you're interested in, let's say, the procurement module, you can just click on the procurement tab and you can download the SOP itself. You can download the tools that we created to go along, some complementary tools for the procurement module. And then if you want some guidance on how to use any of the data, we also have short recordings for each of the deliverable that we produce.
Okay.
The report itself might look like maybe 20 pages, but there are a lot of links embedded into the report, you just click on the link, you'll go to the Electri SharePoint, and then you can download whether it was the Word document, the PDF, the Excel, or even the recording.
Okay. And I think that Electri account's free, right? You can set up, yeah, and for anyone. You don't have to be a NICA member or anybody. Yeah, okay.
Union, non-union, everyone.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you open that up. So I will put a link to that in the show notes on both YouTube and on the podcast channel. So be sure to check that out, everyone, to go learn more. So I was talking to you before this. We're sitting outside here. We're at the NICA show, and we were talking about all these projects you're working on. And so let's talk just real briefly on like another recent project you've worked on and what you've learned from that. So
Sure. So we have a project that we are wrapping up soon that is rework.
rework. Okay.
We're trying to understand, identify, and measure rework among electrical contractors.
Okay.
And then another project that we recently kicked off is the 410 work week schedules. That one we're still kind of taking off, still trying to collect some initial data. But for the rework project, this one, I really have to give a big shout out to Steve Killius.
Okay.
He's the co-chair of my task force, and he truly believed in this project, and he kept going. At first, it was really difficult to collect data and to get people to engage with this project, but he invested his personal capital into this project to help us collect data.
Wow. Okay.
So rework happens. Rework is disrespectful to the people. Rework is demoralizing to the people, and rework it impacts the bottom line.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do with this project is when a mistake happens, you have to learn from it.
Yep.
And turn it into an opportunity. If you don't, the mistake becomes a loss. So in this project, we wanted to understand first the culture around rework.
Okay.
And what we realized from a survey over 110 responses is that people in the field, in the office, they don't want to do rework.
Okay.
They understand that rework has a big impact. All what they're asking for is just like give us a system so that we can learn from our mistakes and not repeat the mistakes.
Okay.
So the objective of this project was to let contractors get a grip on rework. And this is where we developed the guided rework improvement package.
I see another acronym there. Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
There's another one. So this package contains two elements or two components. The combat strategy, that's another acronym.
Okay.
And then we have some supporting tools along with the combat strategy. So I'm not going to go into the details, but the combat strategy, each letter stands for a practice.
Okay.
From culture to problem solving to measuring rework to having the right people champion this effort to eventually scale it up across the organization.
Okay.
And then we also collected some great interviews. We did some great interviews with 26 project managers, superintendents, foremen, and prefab managers.
Okay.
Over 5 companies. So we collected a lot of data just to kind of understand the different problems that usually lead to rework. So again, if you're looking for a problem to solve, we have over 100 problems for you in that report.
Geez. Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge report. I'm really looking forward for it to be published, hopefully in the next month or so.
Okay.
But yeah, the whole goal of that project is to help contractors build a system
Okay.
to help them understand the culture around rework, build a system for problem solving, build a system to measure rework, and then implement and refine that system as you go.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, that's great. We have to may have to have you back on to talk about that. Maybe have Steve come on too to talk.
Yes, yeah. He's
Why-
very passionate.
Yeah, see why you're so passionate about that particular one. So, well, Hala, we are nearing the end of our time. So I would like to close the conversation, kind of refocusing on you and the why of what you do and what we do. So what motivates you to do this day in and day out? What keeps you excited and passionate about what you're doing?
Okay. What motivates me day in and day out? I would say the people.
Okay.
The people that I work with, the relationships that I've built over the years, whether personal or professional, have been, I would say, incredibly fulfilling.
Okay.
It's really amazing to start working with people as part of the project, but then your relationship goes beyond just completing the project and I don't want to see you after the project is done.
Yeah.
It's more about forming that bond and sharing experiences. It's really wonderful. Another source of motivation would be, the impact of the work that we do. It's really rewarding to know that what you do makes a difference. no matter of the scale of that difference, but it is making a difference. It's always great to hear from a contractor that our work has been impacting positively their operations.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we get on LinkedIn notes from companies saying, "Hey, I downloaded this report or this tool, and I found it to be very applied and applicable to the work that we're doing."
That's great.
It's extremely rewarding. It just it reminds us that all the planning, the hard work, the dedication, it pays off. So it's really that combination between the relationships that we build and then the impact of the work.
Okay.
The third one, I would say, this one might be interesting, but it's more of the mindset.
Okay.
You know, I don't know what my parents instilled in me, but they kind of had some principles. If you want time is very valuable. So if you want to invest your time into something, make it worth it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's something I always keep in mind. I'm someone who's really hard to demotivate. So
Okay.
I'm kind of always positive.
Well, it's good that you have a focus when you're thinking about a project. Will this be impactful and stuff? So that's it. Always is nice to hear when your work is appreciated and valuable to somebody. So
No one wants to be wasting their time.
yeah, true. Well, Hala, thank you so much. And I know you're busy. I know you're speaking tomorrow, so you got to get ready for that. And thank you so much for taking some time out to talk to me and to our audience. And it's going to be good stuff for them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, that was my conversation with Hala Nassereddine, PhD, Associate Professor, and President CEO of NCM Consulting, LLC. You can connect with Hala and what she's working on by heading to the links in the show notes. Hey, I would love to hear your experience with SOPs or plans to implement them into your business. Email them to me at podcast@graybar.com. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, you can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving a 5-star rating in your favorite podcast player and on YouTube. Thanks for listening to this episode of Keeping the Lights On. We'll see you next time.
So, Hala, what advice would you give to 18-year-old Hala?
If I am to go back and give my 18-year-old self some advice, I would say trust the process and keep going.
Okay.
So when I was 18, I had just started college and I changed my major multiple times during my first year.
Me too.
Eventually, I landed on civil engineering, not because I've always dreamed of being a civil engineer, but it was really by a process of elimination.
Oh, okay.
And I just ended up with civil. But once I settled my mind on civil, I truly wanted to understand what I was getting myself into. So I basically took on every opportunity that came my way. Dabbling in design, getting a feel for surveying, and spending as much time as possible on job sites. I'd be driving with my dad, and he could truly see that I was not enjoying my major. So he would just ask me, "Hey, do you want to go check out this job site?"
Oh, really?
And we would park and then just go there. And I'd spend about a couple of hours with the workers, with the foreman, with the project manager, just talking to them.
Okay.
And that really kind of helped me understand the different facets of civil engineering. So I would probably tell my younger self, just keep doing what you're doing. Perseverance pays off.
Okay.
And every twist and turn just is part of the journey.